Hey, hi, hello, welcome back. Alexandrian Codex, Che Guevara's Guerrilla Warfare, Section 6 Suburban Warfare. If during the war, the guerrilla band close in on cities and penetrate the surrounding country in such a way that it's able to establish itself in the conditions of some security, it will be necessary to give these suburban bands a special education, or rather, a special organization. Fundamental to recognize that a suburban guerrilla band can never spring up of its own accord. It will be born only after certain conditions necessary for its survival have been created. Therefore, suburban guerrilla will always be under the direct orders of the chiefs located in another zone. The function of this guerrilla band will not be to carry out independent action, but to coordinate their activities with the overall strategic plans in such a way as to support the action of larger groups located in another area, contributing specifically to successes of fixed tactical objectives, without the operational freedom of guerrilla bands of other types. For example, a suburban band will not be able to be will not be able to choose among the operations of destroying telephone lines, moving to make attacks in another locality, and surprising patrol soldiers on a distant road. It will do exactly what it's told. If its function is to cut down telephone poles or electric wires, to destroy sewers, railroads, or water mains, it will limit itself to carrying out those tasks effectively. This is interesting to me. The time where Che was writing this and the experience that Che had was in a country where the majority of the people did not live in urban or suburban environments. Even in the United States at this time, we were not a primarily urban civilization. Mostly were, but not entirely. The majority of the population still lived outside of major city centers. So this logic kind of carries, but as we've seen, in the latter half of the 21st century and the first decades of the 21st century, increased mechanization, automation, and bioengineering have led to a decline in the number of people who can and need to be employed to facilitate agriculture, which has resulted in people losing jobs and moving towards city centers in order to find work. This is not a thing that only happens in the United States. We see this much more drastically in Africa, for example, and other developing countries where the changing economic landscape and material industrial landscape results in people coming to cities looking for work. And in the United States, it's no different, though we like to dress it up as people looking for opportunity or pursuing the American dream and not, well, we exported all the jobs overseas and automated the rest, so you can't do anything here. I don't know, man. Good luck. Uh, so, so yeah, he's writing with a very different, and this is where I start to uh, get a lot of friction reading this when I did before and as I am now. I don't know if Che's right about this. I'm trying to keep an open mind, but it just like I don't see. I can't envision an urban-led revolution in the an agrarian-led or rural-led revolution in the United States. I mean, maybe. I suppose the American Revolutionary War was primarily fought and facilitated by those means, right? In most major cities were at some time or another occupied by British occupying forces, British colonial forces, and pretty effectively at that. Cities were often strongholds of the status quo at that time. And as I've talked about, a few other examples of successful militant movements in the United States wars in this continent. Yeah, yeah, I guess it carries. I just don't like it very much, I suppose. Uh, but it carries and it makes sense. Yeah. A suburban band ought not to number more than 4 or 5 men. The limitation on numbers is important because a suburban guerrilla must be considered as situated in exceptionally unfavorable ground, where the vigilance of the enemy will be much greater and the possibilities of reprisals and betrayal are increased enormously. Another aggravating circumstance is the suburban guerrilla band cannot depart far from the places where it's going to operate. Speed of action and withdrawal there must be added to a limitation on the distance of withdrawal from the scene of the action and the need to remain totally hidden during daytime. This is not a nocturnal guerrilla band in the extreme, without possibilities of changing its manner of operating until the insurrection is so far advanced that it can take part as an active combatant in the siege of the city. Oh, this is a nocturnal guerrilla band in the extreme. Yeah, interesting, right? So he's not saying take to the streets. In fact, quite the opposite. Hide. You and 3 or 4 friends hide and don't trust anyone and only do things at night and do them in conjunction or in support of an ongoing movement somewhere else. The essential qualities of the guerrilla fighter in this situation are discipline, perhaps in the highest degree of all, and discretion. They cannot count on more than 2 or 3 friendly houses to provide food. It's almost certain that encirclement will, in these conditions, be the equivalent of death. Weapons, furthermore, will not be of the same kind of those other groups. They'll be for personal defense, the type that don't hinder rapid flight or betray a secure hiding place. As their armament, the band ought to not have more than 1 carbine or 1 sawed-off shotgun, maybe 2, with pistols for the other members. They'll concentrate on their action as prescribed sabotage and never carry out armed attacks, except by surprising 1 or 2 members or agents of enemy troops. For sabotage, they need a full set of instruments. A guerrilla fighter must have good saws, large quantities of dynamite, picks, shovels, apparatus for lifting rails, and, in general, adequate mechanical equipment for the work to be carried out. This should be hidden in places that are secure, but easily accessible to the hands of those who will need it. If there's more than 1 guerrilla band, they'll all be under a single chief who will give orders as to the necessary tasks through contacts of proven trustworthiness who live openly as ordinary citizens. In certain cases, a guerrilla fighter will be unable to maintain their peacetime work. Will be able to maintain their peacetime work, but this is very difficult. Practically speaking, a suburban guerrilla band is a group of men who are already outside the law, in a condition of war, situated as unfavorably as we have described. Now, this is pretty important. He's not saying it's impossible to maintain this peacetime work, this life as an ordinary citizen. It's not impossible, but it is difficult, exceedingly difficult. The importance of a suburban struggle has usually been underestimated. It's really very great. A good operation of this type extended over a wide area paralyzes almost completely the commercial and industrial life of the sector. Places almost the entire population in a situation of unrest, of anguish, almost of impatience for the development of violent events that will relieve the period of suspense. If from the first moment of the war, thought is taken for the future possibility of this type of fight, and the organization of specialists started, a much more rapid action will be assured, and with it a saving of lives and of priceless time of the nation. And that's it. That's the end of chapter 1. And we got that one in less than 10 minutes. Of course, he doesn't talk nearly as much about a suburban fighter as he does a rural fighter in favorable or unfavorable territory. And given the geography and demographics of Cuba at the time and his experience, very, 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 very different, right? But it's quite provocative, and yeah, I wish he had written more, frankly. about a suburban or urban fighter in that section, what that band looks like. But it seems like, you know, not where he spent the majority of his action, not where he spent the majority of his time, because in his mind, by the time this nascent, small, rural, backwoods, peasant-backed insurrection got formidable enough and gained enough momentum to actually reach urban centers, there was a great deal of momentum and support, even popular support, given again that the majority of the population lived outside of urban areas. That culturally, the atmosphere was more rife to attract and inspire suburban bands and urban bands. So in his experience and his narrative, those things come after. I'd be really interested in reading an argument for those coming first, right? I think to that you would probably have to look at European revolutions and European histories of guerrilla warfare of resistance, looking at like the French resistance in World War II, or the various French revolutions, or the Paris Commune, things like that. And I know the Parisian Commune didn't last very long, but still something to learn from it, huh? Alright, well, that's it for chapter 1. What? 39 pages out of, again, like 140? Not that bad, but I'm gonna stop there for today. Knocked a few out, I'll upload these. If you're enjoying this, great. Again, there's no guarantees I'm gonna keep doing this. Really depends on my mood for the day. You should just look in the description below, get the link, read it yourself, think about it on your own. And yeah, fine. These are terrifying, desperate times where disease, economic collapse, political disenfranchisement are pushing people into terror and fear and anxiety about the future. And if you can read something like this, that to me is reassuring, to me helps provide a guideline. Okay, so if things get really bad, if I find myself, and if I find myself, this is not my beautiful wife, in circumstances such as those, having a framework is very comforting. And of course, this is just me, and like when I suppose this mentality started around 11 or 12. This is totally extraneous at this point, but you're getting it. I started reading survival guides, army training manuals, reading what kinds of plants were toxic or non-toxic where I lived and throughout the United States, because I don't know. I always had this fixation on, well, what if the worst thing happens? What if I'm in an airplane and it crashes? How do I survive? Or what if car breaks down in the middle of the Mojave? Or what if, society just ends and I have to build a water purification system tomorrow? It's been immensely calming to just be like, okay, that's how I'll do it. Okay, that's how that's done. Okay, that's how it has been done. This is an example of how you can successfully engage with, survive, and maneuver around in these circumstances. So that's generally the sort of value I would attribute to Che here. Yeah. These are very uncertain times, and this is probably going to be, what day is it? It's the 4th. The next two and a half weeks are probably going to get pretty bad here in the United States. That may be the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic, if we're lucky, within the next couple of weeks. But it could linger on for, another 4 months. So, till tomorrow, take care of yourself. Take care of other people. Help people if you can. Again, if you still have a job, you're still going out in public, stay safe. Use good sense. Wear a fucking mask, gloves, and wash your goddamn hands. But also look after people in your community. Donate to whatever causes your town or city or state or organize or political affiliation. In my case, again, DSA is doing some really important work right now, as always. Yeah, stay safe out there, kids. Toodaloo.